set auto-destruct sequence.
It's the time allotted that concerns me.
Recognize Picard, Jean-Luc, Captain. Recognize Riker, William T, Commander.
Maximum warp!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Warp Core Podcast. This is our 100th episode of the Warp Core Podcast here in Pending Rebrand. Wanted to give a special shout out and thank you to everyone who's been with us on this journey. If you've been with us since day one, our humblest thank yous. And if you just joined us recently, welcome aboard the Starship Warp Core Prize. I don't know, however you want to phrase it, but we are 100 episodes deep with no signs of slipping, stopping, or getting anything but maybe grayer and fatter and balder for some of us. But here we are, 100 episodes in, and if you drop us a comment and hit us up directly, you can win a special mystery surprise prize pack, courtesy of Pending Rebrand and the Warp Core Podcast. If you drop us a comment, you have to post your favorite Star Trek character. And if you get the mystery character that I am thinking of right now, you could be our lucky winner. So drop us a comment. We'll be drawing those winners up, or excuse me, we'll be drawing that winner up here in the next couple weeks, and we will reach out to you directly via direct message here on YouTube. But thank you again, all of our listeners, all of our watchers. If you're on Spotify, head over to our YouTube page, find episode 100 of the Warp Core Podcast, drop us a comment so you can enter to win as well. And moving on into Star Trek, The Next Generation, we join that Enterprise D crew on an awesome episode, one of my favorites. This is Haven. You may remember Haven for being the one with some interesting things going on. But I don't want to steal anything away from our good friend Fert Derby, broadcasting from the Void. Fert Derby, hit us up. What's going on with Haven?
Hi, everybody. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to 100 episodes here of the Warp Core. When we started this journey just a few short seasons ago, we had no idea just how far we could take the Warp Core. Clearly, there's plenty of room left in those old engines, so stick with us as we cascade through the Bermanverse. Be sure to check out all of our back episodes on the original Star Trek series, on Strange New Worlds, which we anticipate to have even more exciting things to talk about later this summer. All of it, all Trek, all the time, right here. Well, this is the last episode from 1987, which means it's the last episode that Lord Uther and I were just 14-year-old freshmen in high school. This was Haven on November 30th, 1987, and following this, they took a brief siesta and returned bright, shiny, and new in January of 1988, and we can't wait to crack open a new year on future episodes. Haven was directed by Richard Compton. He made his mortgage payments working in television. He directed episodes of The X-Files, Charmed, Sliders, Babylon 5, and Miami Vice. So if you were a fan of late 80s, early 90s serialized science fiction or young adult television, this was your guy. And it was written, the story was by Tracy Torme and Lan O'Kuhn. And the teleplay is the first from Tracy Torme, and it's worth mentioning a little bit about Tracy's backstory. He was actually the son of Mel Torme, who of course wrote the evergreen Christmas classic, The Christmas Song. You've heard it, covered by hundreds of artists throughout the years, Nat King Cole being a personal favorite of mine. It's the one that starts with chestnuts roasting on an open fire and Jack Frost nipping at your nose. So you know it. And as a result of his father writing that song, Tracy really never had to work a day in his life, given the royalties. You might remember the Hugh Grant character from 2002's About a Boy. He was a songwriter who had a jingle and then just lived perpetually off of those royalties and never had to work a day in his life. And that could have been Tracy, but he had bigger ambitions. than just cashing the checks. He went to USC and Loyola Marymount to study film and writing. He worked on Saturday Night Live and the Canadian version of Saturday Night Live, SCTV. And he was a story editor and writer for The Next Generation for the first 2 seasons. This is his first episode. He has, I believe, 4 credited, I believe, this season, 3 or 4. But this was his splash. He's probably best known, not necessarily just for his work on The Next Generation, but for his cult Fox television show Sliders, which starred Jerry O'Connell, airing from 1995 to 2000. That was a very popular, sort of a quantum leap for a new generation show. He also contributed to HBO's underrated science fiction Twin Peaks-ish show Carnival. And in fact, there was a star of Carnival in this episode, Robert Knepper, who plays Wyatt. There's Sliders there themselves. So we have a connection to Carnival. It's a fantastic show, very dark, very full of mysticism and magic and mystery. And he also wrote a picture that has still scared Urza Master to this day, 1993's Fire in the Sky, a UFO abduction thriller that starred James Garner, which didn't often get Jim on the big screen following his Rockford Files days, but he did appear as a deputy sheriff in that, and that was also Tracy. Unfortunately, we lost him far too soon at the age of 64. He died of diabetes complications in 2024. So Tracy is no longer with us, but his legacy lives on in his writing. And one of his finest examples of that is The Next Generation's Haven. This also had, in addition to Robert Knepper from Carnival, this also had the first on-screen appearance of Majo Barrett, I can never say her first name, Mrs. Gene Roddenberry, who would go on to play the character of Lwaxana Troi throughout several seasons and a couple of other series, as I recall. It also featured a very tall Dutch actor named Carl Strucken. For Twin Peaks fans, of course, we remember Carl as the Giant or the Fireman, if you watch season 3. He also played Lurch in the Paramount remake big screen of The Addams Family and Addams Family Values in the early 90s. And we also had a quick blink and you'll miss it cameo from Armin Shimmerman as the face of a gift box for Lwaxana Troi's wedding there. So lots of faces in front of the camera, lots of excitement behind the camera with Tracy's writing. He actually wasn't happy with the overall results, but that's probably just he was a stickler and somewhat of a perfectionist, and it being his first script, you have to balance your ideals and expectations with what can actually be realized with budgets and sets and the like. Nevertheless, gentlemen, I hope as we celebrate this Mother's Day weekend together here on the Warp Core, I hope that your wives and your moms all look at you the way that Will Riker looks at Deanna Troi during this episode. And I think I want to kick off the discussion with my fellow bridge mates just on how, even though we kind of know where the relationship's going to end up and all of that stuff, it's still powerfully poignant to see the very first seeds, the very first sproutings of this relationship between Riker and Troi, this relationship that might appear doomed. You have to remember in 1987, we didn't know anything really much about their backstory. It kind of felt like a rehash of Decker and Ilea from the motion picture. But both performers, and I know that Deanna Troi gets her fair share of criticism in and around the internets from time to time. I thought her performance, in terms of capturing that being torn between duty and love, I thought that was tremendous. I thought Jonathan Frakes was perfect in giving us an emotion that we didn't often feel was authentic enough in the original series when Kirk would encounter an old flame or so forth. He really made it hurt. He really made the idea that the woman he loved, even if he couldn't declare it openly, was going to spend the rest of her life with somebody else based on a familial obligation. And like I say, it's not as if the episode is just chock-a-block full of soap opera-ish scenes. We only get a few interactions, but boy, do they land, and do they land well. And the other thing that Tracy Torme brings to this episode, and we're about 10 episodes in now to the first season, is some welcome humor, but not at the expense of the characters. So we don't just have an interruption of the action or so forth, or have people behaving out of their prescribed expectations that we've seen. The humor feels genuine, and it comes from who these people are and their relationships with each other. And that's an important thing if you want to have a show that lasts 7+ seasons and multiple big screen adaptations and then reboots in the new millennium. You can't always be about failed warp cores and Klingon attacks and so forth. You have to have heart, and you have to really be provoked to emotion. And so look at Mr. Torme's contributions overall to the show and to this episode specifically, gentlemen. And I feel like this is another pivot turning point early, where all of a sudden these people aren't cardboard cutouts. They are, in fact, at least as far as the reality of the show, living, breathing, fictional characters that have pulses and blood running through their veins and emotions and jealousy. And these are all things that we feel, we can empathize with. And I thought it was a terrific layering to the characters in the show that we know it's going to become down the road. Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. I think any of the episodes of TNG with Lwaxana Troi are exceptionally good. And it really is a credit to Tracy Torme and the writing of this episode, adding that depth of, it's sort of silly humor, like when she's like, Captain, the thoughts you're having. It's compelling television. I mean, and it's presented in such a way that does feel unforced, I guess is maybe the only way I can describe it. Like you don't feel like you're being acted at, you feel immersed in the experience. The familial hubbub, the obligations here. I think the only issue I take with this characterization in Haven is the boyfriend, and I forget his name, or not the boyfriend, but the betrothed.
Wyatt.
He plays it a little stiff. It comes off like, I don't know, not quite as personable as you get from the other characters. That could just be a victim of Majel Barrett is just a tremendously talented actress, and she brings this, I want to call it gravitas, but it's sort of silly, so it's kind of hard to call it that, but this literal gravity. I mean, she changes the mood of every sequence she's in, for the better or worse, I suppose. And it's incredible to see the rest of the cast around her, because that brings that nuance of development you're talking about. And none of the episodes preceding, and many of the interloping episodes between these Lwaxana Troi stories, they just don't quite hit that mark. I mean, there are others that do well too, but it's different with these because she's such a force of personality. And I think it's a writing tool to give us, like, the romantic Riker. We get the lay in the pipe Riker all the time, or we get the stoic, fire Riker, and those are awesome. Those are great. I mean, kudos to Will Riker as a character, because he is a perfect starship captain in a lot of ways, and also a perfect sort of love interest like a Kirk. But he also has this incredible human depth that I would go out on a limb and say that Kirk really didn't have, or at least it didn't come through as well. because you get these romantic episodes with Deanna Troi that it's genuine. I mean, if you told me in real life that Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis, had gotten married outside of the show and were happily together for the last 30 years, I'd believe it 100%. From the way they play it on screen, it really feels genuine. And I almost kind of wish they had, because that would have been an amazing television story. But this episode in particular, it's really hitting you with sort of these left field punches that, like, arranged marriage and this strange betazoid, mental telepathy kind of thing going on. It could be a very goofball episode that you might have seen in the original series, but instead it takes a real human turn and, brings you into that sort of modern 21st century, even though we're in the 24th / the 20th century. But it still plays super well on screen. The rest of the cast has to act around Majel Barrett. And that just shows you nuance to their characters that you would never otherwise see because of that force of personality.
Yeah, I was going to say she stole the show without a doubt. The guy who played Wyatt, and I wouldn't think anyone in the galaxy not from Earth would be called Wyatt, because why would you? It just seems like a weird name. I'm Wyatt from the planet Endor. Like I thought it was kind of weird. He does. It's almost like he doesn't fit in with the rest of the cast. I don't know if he wasn't seasoned enough. I don't know if he was supposed to act that way. Whatever it was. Sorry, my phone's going off. Whatever it was, the struggle was real for him a little bit. But I think, again, the show kind of revolves around Majel Barrett, and I think that I think without her, or if it was someone different, this episode would have been it would have struggled. I just think it would not have flowed as well, because to your point, it's those little pieces of humor that we're going to see going forward too, right? Like, spoiler alert, she's going to be in more episodes. And it's almost like she loves herself so much as Lexwana. It's just funny how she almost takes herself, doesn't take herself too seriously, but loves herself more than probably the people around her. So I think that is what kind of gives it that little bit of goofiness as well. I don't think this felt like also like an episode where we don't want to spend any money on special effects. So I think besides maybe the or the tractor beam on the ship, that might have been all they kind of did, which is fine. But as all of our millions and millions of fans know, I love space battles, and obviously did not get one here, but that's okay. This feels like an episode that should have totally been flushed down the toilet, and they wound up instead, just kind of not saving it, but it winds up being a really good episode. This is one that I think is a pretty good episode overall.
Let me ask you this, gentlemen, because I did wrestle with this briefly, and I take your point on Robert Knepper, although, again, having seen more of his work, I think this is kind of the rule, not the exception as far of it. I would guess that in 1987, as a young actor, he might have had a little difficulty wrapping his head around. So what am I doing? Like, I'm on this space show that with all these weird, it's possible. He's kind of more of a grounded actor, and his work, even though he's done some more genre stuff, has been more contemporary. So that just might have been a case of he just wasn't feeling the vibe of late 80s Star Trek. But that being said, the one thing I would say is that Torme does let her off easy, right? We have this very difficult, like, think of Wyatt as like the Bill Pullman type character in the mid 90s. He was always getting dumped because he would have allergies, or he just was kind of boring and so forth. And whoever he was acting across, Linda Fiorentino or Sandra Bullock or whatever, they'd always go with the other guy. And so he was always like the bridesmaid who never really made it to the altar.
That's him?
No, but I'm saying that's Robert Knepper.
Oh.
I'm saying in this episode, he's not a bad guy. He's not abusive. He's very I'll do whatever you want, like he seems like he would just be the ideal husband. Again, a little boring. And then he ends up, joining the lepers because his dream girl in visions was actually, one of these people that are suffering medically. And I just wonder if that was an easy out for Troi, like having him make that choice. I'd rather be with them and this dream girl. I don't know. I don't think it undercuts the poignancy of Riker Troi, but we've set up this like impossible choice. Who do you go with? Do you go with your first love, or do you go with this guy who, again, he's a doctor? It's what every mom wants her daughter to date and marry. And I just felt like when Wyatt makes the choice we all see coming a mile away, I just felt like it lets Troi off the hook emotionally. Like she didn't have to make that tough decision ultimately, which is good because then we got 7 more seasons with her. But you take my point. Did you find that it was just a little bit of a pat solution to it, or should she have basically told Wyatt, I'm not going to be with you, my heart is elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera?
I think critics at the time probably saw it as an easy out, but how true to life is it that the quote unquote ideal match, despite the whole arrangement, despite all of this, is like, wow, it seems like they're actually really good for each other. But he's like, oh, there's a buxom blonde, I'm going with her. Like, especially in the 80s, like it does feel a little bit like an easy out. But I think in hindsight, I think the first time you see this episode, you're probably like, it seems a little convenient. I do think in hindsight, like they could have easily killed him off. Like, there could have been like just a fight on the planet and oops, he dies. Like that would have felt very Star Trek as well. But I think that the fact that he's this selfless doctor that, truly wants to help these people. And, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm also telepathically been in love with this buxom blonde. Like, I'm going to go with them. You can tell, like, this is a moral struggle for Deanna Troi. And, she feels obligated through tradition, through all these, sort of uncontrollable circumstances. But she's like, well, I could get used to the idea. Maybe I'll be okay with this. Maybe it won't be so bad. It seems like it'll be good. Oh, phew. Like you get that I can actually chase what I really want in life. And you still get some reluctancy even in the whole like realization / confession of feelings between her and Riker, that the two kind of know, like, we probably can't do this anyway, so maybe this is for the best. I think there's more, I don't know, complexity to the story than it would be on the surface. I could see at the time, in the moment, being like, it's a little Deus Ex Machina, or, it's just a little bit convenient. I don't know that that's necessarily how it plays out, 30, 40 years later when I'm looking back at the show and going, well, actually, if I really think about this, it's a little more nuanced than it appears on the surface. Not to mention the fact that the entire time, and we haven't even touched on this plague ship, which is all they think it is for a while, they're being begged by this like utopian paradise planet to just blow them out of the stars. They're like, please murder them. Like, oh, wait a minute, we don't even know why they're here. We can't even make contact with them. Like, how do we know they're going to do anything? They're going to kill us all. You got to kill them. Like, there is something to be said about some of the greater themes that they touch on without even addressing, really. This sort of fear of others / fear of the unknown. And that's really, I think, what Star Trek's always been about, is sort of breaking down that barrier. And that, it speaks to how layered this episode is, that gets lost in everything else.
I have actually a more pressing issue or question. Marie, ever see the episode of Seinfeld where he has the two-faced girlfriend? Depending on the lighting, she's like incredibly ugly, or or she's incredibly hot. And I feel like Marina Sirtis goes through this at different points through Next Gen. Like it's almost like they can't figure out her character, which I still feel like they're trying to decide what to do with her in a sense. But even her outfits, like they just can't get it right the first couple seasons. And this was an episode where I was like, oh man, I feel like this is a Seinfeld episode where she's struggling a little bit there. So to me, that was That was probably the biggest concern out of everything.
I mean, it's a good point. I always thought like she talks about in interviews, Marina Sirtis, about hating that little cheerleader outfit that leaves almost nothing to the imagination in the first couple episodes. And it's really true. Like even the basic costuming of her character, like they couldn't quite figure out is she supposed to be like the sex image or like the object of affection? And then within the first couple episodes, you get Tasha Yar as kind of this like, I mean, I don't know if you want to say wanton, fertility goddess that takes Data into the back room, yeah, which is a weird, like, it's a weird deal anyway. But it's like they can't quite figure out like who's going to be the object of affection. And then Luxana Troi in this episode steps into that role and just like takes it. She's like, oh my, and that like Majel Barrett, like when you talk about comedic acting, because she wasn't unattractive. She was an attractive woman at the time. But just to like thrust it out into everybody's faces, like it seems a bit, and I don't know about at the time, but it seems a bit like, really is everybody thinking these thoughts about her? Because at first I'm like, I don't know that I am. I'm not necessarily opposed, but it's just like, this is like to think of her as like this icon of lust for some of these characters on the ship. It's like, really, Luxana Troi? But she's like, well, she does know their innermost thoughts. I mean, I guess so. And that kind of steals a bit of that light off of Deanna Troi for a bit, where she kind of can actually be sort of the other side of the facing camera angle of the Seinfeld episode, which is a great way to put it. She didn't have to be like that sex image. And that's kind of cool. Like if you think about the 80s at the time, like I think in most of, what I remember from watching from that era, most of that was kind of a real big divide. You get your G.I. Janes who really weren't, I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, really weren't all that sexy, I guess, or weren't supposed to be anyway. And then you'd get like the weird science where it's literally invented for the one purpose, that character. And it just happens to be, I mean, even the movie like Mannequin, is all about this. And there's still depth of character, but they're really presenting, if we look at the original series, they're presenting women in completely different ways than you'd expect for Star Trek. And they're kind of flipping that sort of expectation on its head, which is really cool. Beyond the fact that like, yeah, these are attractive women on the show. And Hollywood typically, especially at the time, probably didn't hire that many unattractive women. But it works. Like they're able to play all sides, and I don't think it detracts from the prowess of the actors. It definitely doesn't detract at all from their ability to portray a character. But they're able to play with that. They take that kind of old school expectation of like Kirk's going to get the gal, which by the way doesn't happen as much as I think we've been led to believe. But they kind of play with that sort of trope a little bit. And I find that very pleasing. Like it's something that makes me giggle every time I see some of these episodes, especially when, and we'll talk later in the series, when it's Picard and Vash. I can't wait to talk about that because that is something truly exceptional.
Well, look, anytime I can get a reference to a Kim Cattrall movie, it's time to end an episode because it doesn't get any better than that. So I'll go first. I'm gonna go. I think this is a 4. I'm gonna give it a 4.75. So it's not really 5. It's not really 4.5. Again, kind of some of that stiff acting by Wyatt from wherever he's from. And I think the easy out ending, like we've brought up, which I think that was another excellent point, because that's all you find here on the Warp Core Impending Rebrand is excellent points. So I think that's why it's going to get my 4.75 out of 7 Warp Cores. What say you, Urza?
It's not quite a 6 for me. Even though it's Luxana Troi, which is a favorite of mine. It's foundational for Next Gen, but I would say Wyatt does kind of bring this down. No offense to Robert Knepper. I love that song he did for Rocky IV. But I'm going to put this in 5.5 warp cores out of 7. It's definitely a cut above. It really does feel like what next gen is and what it's going to become when it's more consistent. It sets a lot of good tones and plays with a lot of our expectations. Majel Barrett is an absolute stunner in this episode when it comes to acting and ability, and steals the show. Like you put it, Lord Uther, it's definitely, it's a favorite for that alone. Although I do think there's enough goofiness and enough oddball acting from Wyatt Miller there that it doesn't quite hit the way I want it to. But no doubt it's starting to set the bar a little bit higher.
Gentlemen, I must be an optimist or someone who pines for love's keen sting, because I unabashedly wrote in my notes it's a 6 for me, and I think I was grading knowing again where this ultimately ends up, how we see them in Picard, and what relationship hurdles they have to do to get to that point, and what relationship hurdles we see as a aging couple, et cetera, et cetera. I think I took the breadth and the depth and the totality when I saw this, because this was, again, the first real on-screen inklings of where it will all go. So I am guilty a little bit of having foreknowledge. I don't know that it would have been a 6 in 87 on those terms, because obviously who can see the future besides oracles and the like. But looking at it as I did now, with my older eyes, I think this was just a powerful sketch of a relationship that we want to see succeed, and again, something that makes Trek deeper, more human, richer in characterization than most of our science fiction entries out there. So you try that, Battlestar Galactica 1978. I don't remember ever thinking poor Starbuck and all the women he was leading around by the nose. Like, what if he missed out on Cassiopeia or Athena or the like? That's a deep cut for those of you who enjoyed late 70s. Or Buck Rogers. We never worried that Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray weren't really going to end up together. So yes, give me a 6. This is, I've been pleasantly surprised by first season Trek, despite all of the negativity around certain circles and all of that. I really feel like the show, like, it's taking its time to find itself, as we mentioned, and it will get even stronger with subsequent seasons. But even the bad ones, and there have been a couple so far, they haven't really scraped any bottoms of barrels. And when you get something like this with the depth of characterization, I mean, it's a sight to see. Like, there's no one should apologize or hang their heads for this one. So go with 6.
Very solid, very solid. Well, any episode of the Warp Core podcast is a great episode, but especially if you get an episode where we mention the fantastic series Sliders, Jonathan Rhys-Davies, Jerry O'Connell, Kari Vorer, and others. Amazing, amazing. Cannot recommend it enough. I do a whole podcast on that because it's such a great show, and I loved it. Loved it. But we are 100 episodes deep. We are moving into that next century of Warp Core episodes. Again, subscribe, like, share, and don't forget to drop us a comment. Enter to win that mystery pending rebrand / Warp Core podcast prize pack. What's in it? I don't even think we know. But drop your favorite Star Trek character in the comments. If it matches the mystery character that's buried right up here in Urza Master's noggin, you could win special prizes. We'll connect with the winner offline. But thank you again to Lord Uther, Fert Derby. Thank you to everyone out there watching and listening on Spotify. I am Urza Master from Lord Uther, Fert Derby, and myself. Make it so.